Hi, everyone. Happy Friday as we record this. Bleav in Bills. The first preseason game coming up on Saturday, Bills-Bears. Adam Benigni, WGRZ-TV, Sports Talk Live, Buffalo, and Sal Maiorana, Rocheseter Democrat and Chronicle with you here. Sal, how are we doing?
I am good. I'm hoping that my street's not going to wash away today, Adam, because it's been raining, pouring for like 7 hours in a row. But I think we're getting towards the end of it here, so hopefully my house won't be floating down the street while we're doing this.
It's been off and on here in Buffalo as well. All right. I don't know. I generally, after decades of doing this, I don't have much use for preseason games, really. Yeah. And I'd prefer the college approach where they just kind of have a camp, line up, and play. But I mean, I do think there is usefulness for the Buffalo Bills. And in the Rocheseter D&C, I think you did a good job of kind of outlining 5 key points, things that you're going to be watching and so many other fans, I think, will be watching in this first game. Again, Saturday, 1 o'clock, Orchard Park against the Chicago Bears. Why don't we start by picking up on our conversation about Josh Allen and the decision. Starters, it goes beyond Josh, obviously, but starters going to play about a quarter or so. I think there are, and I think Sean McDermott alluded to this, there are a lot of new parts, specifically in that receiver room on the offensive side of the ball. And you and I, in our discussion the other day, suggested he could probably benefit from some time in there with some of these new receivers.
Yeah, I mean, look, Adam, the preseason's a necessary evil. And I mean, I'm sure most of the coaches would prefer just going right into the season, maybe do a joint practice with somebody to get, some of that opponent stuff out of the way. But they're also relatively important for especially teams that aren't like the Bills that are in a Super Bowl window. You're trying to pick your roster. So from the Bills' perspective, they've got most of their starting jobs figured out, but there are back end of the roster things they need to figure out. I mean, we don't think much about the 51st, 52nd, 53rd guys, but they are necessary. And this is where, the rubber hits the road for some of these kids. So I understand that they've got to play them. I mean, you and I both know there's probably going to be only 2 in a few years. There's probably going to be an 18th game and only 2 of these, but they got to do them. And if you got to do them, like we discussed, I think that Josh Allen, even though he sort of said the other day that he would prefer not to, he was as close to saying that as he's ever said it before as he goes into year 7. But I don't think it's a bad thing for him to get at least a quarter of work with the starting unit. As you alluded to, there's a lot of new pieces on this offense, and I don't see how those game reps are going to be a bad thing for him. And here's the key point, too. I don't think, knock on wood, I don't think he's going to get hurt because he knows enough when the pressure's coming that he'll get out of there and he's not going to run down the field trying to be superstar Josh Allen. He'll get out of bounds or slide. So I think the injury risk is really minimal for him. And as we said, it won't hurt him to get some reps in with these guys in a game situation. And I think that goes for, a lot of other guys on the roster. So, again, necessary evil, and this is what they're going to do.
Yeah, with a guy like Allen, I mean, my natural instinct, I'd be nervous with him on the sideline holding a clipboard, even in the press box, right? Like, and you think of Joe Burrow, for example, last year in kind of a non-contact freaky situation. That's a risk for anybody, I suppose. But, again, it's hard in practice to necessarily simulate a game situation. And especially with the new receivers, I agree with you. I think the risk reward, that's the balance that you evaluate with every one of these decisions. And I would probably err in this case on the side. If things go well for a series or two and you get something out of it, get them the hell out of there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think ideally Sean McDermott, would love to win the coin toss, put the offense out first. They go on a 10-play, 80-yard drive and get them out. I think that would be the ideal scenario rather than, they go out 3 and out on the first 2 series and he hasn't really seen anything. So maybe you got to put him out for a 3rd series. So ideally, one great series where they go down on the field and score would be perfect, and he'd yank them right out of the game.
All right. A lot to get to with the receivers. And I know, again, you outlined there's a lot of key elements that fans will and should be watching. Keon Coleman is right near the top of that list. He has been incredibly impressive in training camp Now we get to at least get a sense of how that translates to NFL game action.
Yeah, he's looked very good, Adam. I mean, and again, that's the one thing you can evaluate in training camp is receiver versus DB, because there is something going on there. You can't really evaluate offensive and defensive line play, even running backs who have to make a guy miss because they're not tackling. But you can definitely get a good sense of how the receivers are performing and obviously how the defensive backs are. And I think Coleman has done very well for a rookie. He has come in, he has looked like he belongs. He also looks like he belongs to be in the starting unit. Not the greatest speed guy, but he can get downfield. He can get some separation, which we saw, on occasion in camp. And he's caught the ball pretty well. I got to admit, I mean, he's flashed almost every practice. There's a play like, oh, wow, that was a nice play. So I'm impressed by what I've seen so far. And this is going to ratchet it up now, right? Going against another defense. It's a pretty good Bears defense. I'm not sure who all is going to play, but they've got a pretty good defense there. So it'll be a really good test for Coleman to see, what he can do. And, we'll start to get an idea of how the Bills might want to use him. They're not going to show, too much in this game, but we will get a sense of, how they might want to incorporate him into the passing game. So that's definitely going to be a thing for fans to watch for sure.
And it is within the context of trends in the National Football League over the past number of years. It used to be that receiver was among the difficult positions to transition to from the college game to the National Football League level. That's changed. We've seen young receivers make very significant impacts, and the hope is that obviously that Coleman can do that. But there is,
well, and you know why that
obviously,
is. You know why that is, because these receivers now, back in the day, Adam, Andre Reed and all these guys, there was no 7-on-7 passing camps in high school and all that. These receivers are going into college almost ready to go into the NFL. Some of these guys are so talented, let alone they play 1 or 2 years in college in all these systems that are geared toward the passing game. There's no more Woody Hayes in college football. These teams are all passing the ball. So these receivers come to the NFL. It used to be it would take 2 years, right? Because they had to get all the hot read and they had to understand how to block in the running. These guys are all already very good at most of that stuff when they get to the league. So you see guys like Jefferson and Jamar Chase and all these people jump right in at the get-go. And I think Keon Coleman, I think a lot of people expect him day one to be ready to go. And as I said, we've seen that so far in camp.
Yeah, and what I was alluding to is all of that. It's an excellent point, and that's borne out to be true. But there is, it's much faster at the National Football League level, and the level of precision in the route running that's required on some of the timing stuff and all of that is at a whole different level. They can't get away with what they got away with, an elite athlete at the college game. So there is still that to adjust to. And I think a game like this and these preseason games, as well as in training camp, because it is receiver on DB, you can get a sense. He's pretty well along, but there is going to be an adjustment there. Who else among this group of receivers and some of the new ones has stood out to you?
Yeah, I mean, Curtis Samuel, I think, has looked really good. I mean, they've used him in a lot of different ways, Adam, and they said this, they were going to do this with him. When he spent time in 2020 with Joe Brady, that was his best season in the NFL, and they used him all across the formation, including in the backfield. And, we've seen a little bit of that in training camp, too. I think he's going to be a multi-purpose weapon for the Bills, so I like what I've seen there. Quite frankly, I think the best receiver in camp so far has been Khalil Shakir. He has looked really good. I mean, he's caught everything thrown his way, and, which doesn't surprise me because last year, believe it or not, he led the NFL in catch percentage. I think it was 87.5%. Now, not as many targets as some of the top guys, but he catches everything that comes his way. He's looked really good, and they've moved him inside and out too. And that's one of the things that I think is so interesting about this offense. There really isn't, at least at this point, an X and a Z and a slot. They've got these guys interchangeable in all those spots. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they do that. But Samuel and Shakir, and I think Coleman, if they go 3 wide on the first play against Arizona, I think those are the 3 guys you're going to see right now.
And you factor in Dalton Kincaid, who's going to be such a featured element in the passing game and the dimension. They could be very difficult, albeit without the traditional A1 sort of stretch the field kind of guy. there's going to be a lot to account for
Yeah.
a defensive coordinator. Not to mention, James Cook reached another level last season, and now the element of Ray Davis. Let's talk about the running game, the versatility there, and how it may be able to complement what they're doing offensively.
Yeah, we saw this when Brady took over last year. Now, part of this was it was getting later in the year and the weather wasn't quite as cooperative, but they did run the ball a little more under Brady than they did under Ken Dorsey. And I think you're going to see more of that this season. They really like what James Cook can do. He had a nice season last year. I think he finished like 5th or 6th in the league in yards gained from scrimmage, which of course incorporates, catching the ball out of the backfield. So I think they really like what he can bring to the offense. Ty Johnson, we all thought was going to be the number 2 because he's also got that versatility to do both. He's been hurt. So this has given Ray Davis a real opportunity to get tons of reps in practice. And I don't think I know Ty Johnson's not going to play Saturday. So you're going to see James Cook for the first quarter, and you're going to see a lot of Ray Davis and Darrington Evans and whoever else. So Davis has a nice opportunity here. And I know they love him. They loved him in college, Adam. He was a very good runner. He could catch the ball out of the backfield, but what they loved most about him is he was a physical menace. I mean, he was really good in pass protection. So that's an element that if they're going to use him on third down, you've got to be able to do that. We all thought that Ty Johnson had an edge in that area because he's done it in the NFL, but Ray Davis has a really, really interesting chance here with Ty Johnson hurt to make a big impression. He's had some ball security issues. There's been a couple fumbles in practice, so he's got to clean that up. But I'm kind of intrigued by what that kid can do.
Yeah, so a lot for fans and followers of this team to sort of, sink their teeth into on that side of the ball. Not to mention the situation at center and the offensive line and all of that. So switching gears, though, to defense now in the time we have. The safety position right now, the big question mark impacted by injury. Obviously, that stands out. But speaking of injury, and you wrote about this in your article in your preview in the D&C, might we see Von Miller, for example, or Matt Milano, who's working his way back from that horrific leg injury he suffered in London? It's been a long rehab for him. We all know what he means to this defense. Might he get on the field, or will they sort of give those guys as veterans more time?
Yeah, I would be very surprised if you saw either of those guys. Matt Milano, 10 months out of a broken leg. He skipped most of the teamwork during the OTA, so he's just been ramping up now in training camp. And even there, they've mixed in a couple of veteran rest days. So I would be very surprised, especially given his injury history, that they don't just, like as I wrote, just keep him in bubble wrap for the preseason. Let him work the kinks out in practice and just save him for the regular season. I would be surprised if we see him on the field. Now, Von Miller is a little bit of a different case. I don't think he'll play Saturday. I'd be surprised if he does. They play Pittsburgh next week on grass. That might be a better scenario for Von Miller to maybe get his preseason kinks worked out and then sit out the last game too. But the other thing with Von Miller, though, Adam, is that he did play 13 games last year, unlike Milano. So he is, I would think physically he's more ready to go if they had to play him in the first quarter Saturday than Milano would be. So I'm not going to rule out that Miller's going to play, but I would expect him to be really, really, the Bills being really cautious with him, maybe play him against the Steelers, and that'll be it.
Who else has stood out to you, and who are you looking at sort of up front in terms of the pass rush?
Up front for the pass rush, well, Dwayne Smoot has looked pretty good. I mean, that's the free agent they signed from the Jaguars. He played his first 7 years with them. Last year was not a great year. He was hurt. I think he was hurt at the end of 22, and it carried over to 23. And he never really got into a groove last year, so he only had 1 sack. But he has come in, and a couple of the coaches have talked about, he has really brought an attitude, a nastiness, which they need up front. I think the Bills' defensive line has lacked that a little bit. They just haven't had that nasty type of player up front, and I think Smoot can bring that. He's also shown the ability to be able to move inside too, which would be nice because, I think they're going to keep 9, and they're going to need, probably at least one of those guys to be able to flip inside and out, and Smoot could be the guy there. So I've liked what I've seen from him, and I think Rousseau. Again, it's, as I told you, Adam, it's tough to evaluate line play in practice because they're not really going 100%. They're going, but not at 100%. They're not trying to kill Josh Allen in practice. So what we've seen of Rousseau, he looks like he's really ready to go. I talked to him about a week ago, did a story, and I said, do you need this is his 4th year now. He got the contract, the 5th-year option exercise. I asked him point blank, do you need to have your breakout season? What it's going to be 10, 12, 14 sacks. And he said, look, jerk, I've played pretty well for my first 3 years. I just have to be the best version of me, which is, he was basically echoing what Bobby Babbage said about him. But I've said this before in this offseason, Rousseau has to be better than he was the first 3 years. He was good, but he was not the guy that you game plan against, right? You're looking at that guy like, we got to figure out every play where he's at. He's not been that guy so far in 3 years. And I think with Von Miller aging out the way he is, Leonard Floyd's gone, I think Rousseau has got to be that player. So
yeah, they drafted him to be that guy.
Exactly.
It's long past the time when he should evolve to that level and be that guy and be the big difference maker when it matters most in big regular season games and obviously the postseason.
I mean,
Speaking of
he's not going to be Bruce Smith, right? I mean, we know he's not going to be Bruce Smith, but he needs to be, like I said, a guy that the defense has to worry about whenever he's on the field. And I think, based on what we've seen so far, maybe he's trending in that direction this year.
All right. Speaking of high draft picks who they're looking for much more from, and Rousseau's accomplished much more than the guy I'm about to mention, but Kaiir Elam, you wrote about him on the D&C, shown some positive signs, has not been the cornerback they hoped he would be. Obviously, how close, if he could find that next step and find that level of consistency, it could change things. I mean, they're in an okay position at cornerback right now. They could be in a really good situation if he's able to find that next level in terms of his performance. Yeah,
actually, I think they're in a very good spot at cornerback. I really do. I mean, everyone's talking about, Trey White's not here. Trey White hasn't been the same player for 2 years. Really, he hasn't. He was not. He was getting back to being very good last year when he got hurt again. So they've moved on. They've turned the page. Rasul Douglas I think he's just a rock solid guy. On the one side, he's a playmaker, which they need. He took the ball away last year when he came over from the Packers. And Elam has looked very good, but Sean McDermott came right out and said it the other day. He's the third cornerback. And the reason why is Christian Benford has looked great. Christian Benford, they were drafted the same year. Elam was first and Benford was sixth. And since they've been here, Benford's been the better player. I mean, that happens sometimes in drafts, Adam. These lower round guys end up being steals and the upper round guys end up being busts. He's not a bust yet, but he clearly is underwhelmed. Elam is underwhelmed his first 2 years. There are several reasons why. Injuries, of course, were a big part of it. Nobody figured Benford would be better, and he has been. So he has taken those lessons, I think, in the last 2 years. And McDermott spoke about this the other day, that he really has appreciated Elam's work ethic, how he's grinding it out, and he's been very consistent, really, since going back to the spring. So they're in good shape at corner. If one of the top two get hurt, I think this year, for the first time since he's been here, they could feel pretty confident if they have to put Elam in the game and play. So that's a good spot for the Bills to be in.
And he needs to get in there and show it. And obviously, Benford, as you said, former 6th-round pick out of Villanova, has just been, talk about value.
Yeah.
I mean, extraordinarily high. That can be the difference. I mean, those types of decisions, you can hit on those guys. That makes a big difference in your overall roster.
It does. I mean, you want your first rounders to be first rounders, and Elam certainly hasn't. But, they've almost offset that by getting Benford in the 6th round, right? It really is. They've almost offset each other. So that's good for the Bills, that they were able to identify a guy like Benford and be able to trust him, and he's come through. I'd say every day in practice, you see him do something. Like, in fact, we mentioned Ray Davis and his ball security issue. When they were at the stadium last week, Ray Davis broke out that one long run. But at the very end of that run, if you were there and you saw it, it was Christian Benford tracking him down and he punched the ball out at the end of the run. Now, some will say, oh, well, he was relaxing because the play was over. No, not in the NFL. The play's never over. Even in practice, you run it all the way to the end zone if you break one out. And Benford made that play. So he really is a pretty cool story that he's done what he's done so far.
All right, and last thing here, we'd be remiss if we didn't get to this. But I do think it's going to impact a number of things. I mean, this new kickoff rule situation and how teams are going to adjust to it. Or what are you looking for in terms of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the Bills, I wrote this, you read the article. I think the Bills are going to put the ball in play every time because they don't want Bass just kicking it out of the end zone. They need to figure out what they're going to do when that ball is inside that landing zone, whether the ball hits the ground or whatever, it's caught by the returner. They need to start figuring out how the play is going to unfold, right? I mean, we've got a few games of preseason where, McDermott said the other day that he didn't watch the Hall of Fame game. Baloney. You know damn well he watched it because he wanted to see what they were doing and see how it looked. So we've got a few more games. There's games tonight, in fact, that we'll get to see if people are interested, how exactly it's going to look. Now, what we're going to see in the preseason is not what we're going to see most likely in the regular season. These teams are all going to play it very vanilla and not show anything off. But what I'm most interested in is how that restraining line, when there's going to be, 10 offensive guys going down and the 9 guys on the return team, how that's going to play out. Because it's almost like a scrimmage play now. Once that ball is touched, it's going to look and feel very much like a regular offense versus defense play. So you're going to start to see how teams maybe line up their blocking assignments and all that. It's going to be interesting to watch. Now, I watched a little bit of the highlights. Nothing really happened in that Hall of Fame game. I didn't see anything from last night. There was nothing interesting in that Hall of Fame game on the kickoff. So maybe we're just making a big deal about this, Adam, and maybe it won't matter at all. But I don't think that's going to be the case.
No, especially when you get to the regular season. But as it pertains to the the preseason and the run up to the openers now, and you'll hear GMs, not just Brandon Beane, but GMs across the league talk about this when it comes to the cuts and formulating roster spots are going to be decided based upon adaptation to this new rule. And I think that's a very relevant fact to consider when you watch these preseason.
I think you're right. The back end of the roster, it used to be like you wanted athletic, fast guys because they're going to play special teams. But because of the nature of that restraining line situation, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be like backup offensive linemen on there, or not offensive linemen, defensive linemen going down to make plays to tackle, and maybe offensive linemen blocking them. I don't know. But it's going to be really weird. Normally you've got your coverage team, bunch of fast, athletic guys going down to make tackles. I think the makeup of those teams is going to be pretty different.
All right, going to be very interesting to watch and how teams adjust. Anything else you want to add here, Sal? It's time to put a wrap on this. What else you got?
Well, I mean, I think we got to worry. People can't worry about result in the preseason, and I think Bills fans are smart enough to know that it's not going to matter who wins the game. But the Bills have got some key decisions to make, and you want certain guys in that back half of the roster to show out. And I think these preseason games are great for that. So people should be paying attention, really not even so much what happens in the first quarter, because we know those people are there. Those guys are starters. They're just working out the kinks. You want that second to fourth quarter. You want to see performance from guys. That'll be the key on Saturday.
All right, 1:00, Bills Bears to get the preseason started here in 2024. This is Bleav in Bills. I'm Adam Benigni, WGRZ-TV. Buffalo, host of Sports Talk Live, Buffalo Monday nights at 7 o'clock on Channel 2 and the WGRZ app. You can watch it live. And he is Sal Maiorana, longtime Bills beat reporter, going on 4 decades now on this beat. Rochester, Democrat, and Chronicle. Thanks for being with us here on Bleav in Bills. And so we're back at it next week with 3 more of these, right?
I hope so, Adam.
All right. He's Sal. I'm Adam. Hope everyone has a great weekend. Bills Bears, 1:00 Saturday, and we will see you next week here on Bleav in Bills.